Good evening, everybody. Michael Devine here, Gray Matters Radio, America's counselor. Now, I'm America. I'm actually going to be doing the intro a little different. So my wife kind of told me the other day that maybe I sound a little bit different when I do my intro. Like, Mike, it sounds like you're almost like
Good evening,
everybody.
Well, the same thing.
I know. So I kind of like heard that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do a little bit different. So I am America's counselor. And why listen to this show? Well, apparently America's kind of messed up right now. If we're really being honest, isn't it? And everyone's fighting with each other. No one can get along. So if there's ever a time in history when America needs a counselor, it's right now. That's what Gray Matters is. That's why America's counselor. But really, I can't really do it on my own. So naturally, I need some help doing it because it's kind of like a big thing. It's like even, it's the whole damn country. I can't just do the whole therapy on 300 million people. I need a host, right? I need a co-host. So Bill Reed, armchair quarterback, my man.
Welcome. You say America's in a bad spot. You know what? You name it one other back-to-back World War champions. I think we're doing pretty darn good. That's just my opinion, but I see your point.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Where we're at in our history, I think we got some problems. We really can't solve anything. The only thing that we're able to really do is just the small things,
you
right?
Point the finger at the other side and say, I hate you. It's your fault.
Really, if we're being honest, that's kind of what's going on right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's screwed up. What can I say? But it's okay. We can admit it's our screw up. It's our dumpster fire. It's okay. I'm not okay. You're not okay, but it's okay. So, so I'm going to bring in, from time to time, we bring my dad in, the professor. Dad, you there? Richard Devine?
I'm here.
All right. So, now, Dad, you've been alive for obviously longer than we have. Not to say that you're old or anything, but would you say it's a safe, thing to say that we're at a time in our history right now where it is kind of messed up, where America almost kind of does need a counselor. You survived the '60s, and so maybe it's the same. Is there a difference between what's going on right now and then, let's say, how it was in the late '60s, early '70s?
Wow, that's a good question.
Because I do see videos. Because I'll see the marching and the anger.
You could have started with hey, how you doing? But no.
I think if you look at the situational that we had in the '60s, it's almost a list of the same characters that we had in the '60s that are playing out again, and that's the increasingly concern with Russia and China. We were always at supposedly with the Cold War, in which we had the Chinese being communists, the Russians communists. We were in a big Cold War. We had almost nuclear wars going on, with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
If we're being honest, you can't get more messed up than that, right? Nuclear war. Not even kind of nuclear war. It's no, straight up. We thought there was going to be nuclear war.
It wasn't just you thought it was. It was inevitable.
Yeah.
Well, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I think everybody. And Michael, your grandfather, you know how he is, and you know how he was. He really didn't show emotion or anything. And your grandmother showed emotion, but not emotion. But the night in which Kennedy told the American people what was going on, the embargo. I actually literally saw my father's face for the first time, scared as all hell.
Oh, wow.
I saw my mother getting tears in her eyes because I think we all thought this was it. This is the thing that we were going to war. We were going to have an exchange. The invasion of Cuba, and some of your Uncle Butch's friends were in the Marines, were called out. They were going down to Florida to get ready to go. Then we had, then basically it settled down. Then you had the wars in the Middle East has always been a powder keg between the Jews, the Palestinians, the Egyptians, the Syrians, the Iraq. The Iranians were friendly to us at that time. Then we had all the issues going on in Southeast Asia. We had Southwest Asia with India, Pakistan. So I was sitting there just when you said that, and I'm going,
There's a
it's the
more
same
big
bat
messed up
channel.
things. Yeah.
It's the same bat channel, same bat time, but with different players.
Just different generation.
But that, and I
Yeah.
think I do think it's important to delineate that, because it's easy for us to kind of sit here and go, oh my God, things are so messed up, and it's just an inevitability that things are going to just go down a certain direction. But it's like, history does tend to repeat itself. There are these cycles. Like in the news the other day, I was watching something on like Nixon in the 60s, and when he resigned, and literally he's using fake news and all the people like with the their signs, and it's like, all right, well, how much different really was it? And it seems like, I mean, think of the way my dad describes it, it was big messed up things. And I even like a bunch of like, death by 1,000 cuts. It's like nuclear war, multiple countries were all one. It's like everything was a powder keg.
The only thing that's different today than it was back then, we didn't have access to mass media on a 24/7 basis. TV basically was not cabled. I mean, you had cable, but it was basically, you had ABC, NBC, CBS News. So you really weren't in on everything, except you had to learn how to read because you were reading newspapers. That was the big thing. So you were reading your news and all that through the newspapers, from what you could get from TV, and also when you went to the movies, and the movie time news, they would tell you what was going on. So today, you get it so fast.
Do you think that today's?
I mean, when.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I just was saying, when in Vietnam, with the invention of videotape, is the biggest thing that did is because the combat photographers, the news people, could take the pictures at there and then quick send it to the United States, and they were playing it on the 6 o'clock news of what was going on. And the next thing you know, people are going crazy. We're now watching a war on TV, the 6 o'clock news. So I think today it's just, and you're sitting there, and I'll be very honest with you, I am getting to the point where, are these news stations making some things up? So
I was just going to say that.
Breaking news. Okay,
everything is breaking news. Would it be fair to say that you think that the news cycles from the 60s and 70s during the Vietnam era were probably more impartial, so to speak, than they are today? Would you say that? Or?
I really do.
Yeah.
I think CBS, Morley Safer was a real big one. So was.
Well, I think like Walter Cronkite. What was his political affiliation?
Oh, Walter Cronkite.
Tom Brokaw. Dan Rather. I mean, like Peter Jennings.
Dan Rather. That's what I was trying to think of.
A lot of these people you didn't really know.
And if you did, they didn't always bleed over into.
Yeah, you really didn't. And this is probably a good segue into tonight's topic. So we've been on Voice of the Echo Center. We've been talking a lot about the 737 Max. My dad actually was on the show last week, actually, and we were just talking about, from like a manufacturing perspective, that gambling of profits versus safety, and how close does it basically get. And my dad talked a lot about, just from his experience in manufacturing, and especially in automobile, that sometimes there is that gamble that you basically have. And so we've been talking a little bit about the 737 Max. Now, I had the pleasure, off the air, I was able to talk to a colleague of a colleague that is in the aerospace industry, and I can't go into anything.
Come on, name some names.
I wish I could, but I promised I wouldn't. And so I talked to him off the record, just about they're an engineer in aviation, and so I wanted to kind of really get their honest opinion about, with everything that's been going on, what is your honest kind of thoughts? And one of the things that they kind of said was actually along the lines of, the media loves just to make things black and white and have a simple scapegoat, and they go off of ratings and what they think it makes the most salient story. And Boeing, the big billion-dollar multinational conglomerate corporation, is a good target, but the reality is, he goes, look back in the history of aviation. I mean, we have history of planes basically rolling over in midair, blowing, literally having gross errors at multiple times, and it's like, this is not anything that's particularly new, but now with news cycles, because we have video 3 seconds later, we have all this basically going on, that, you have to look at it as how fair really is it that we have, or how fair really is it that, we're only looking at this as Boeing is a big evil giant, because if we're really looking at what our goal basically is to make it to where these planes are safe. And we're not going to make these planes safe if we're only going off of it's all Boeing's fault. We have to look at this as a systemic kind of thing, and the news is not doing us any favors. And talking with this particular engineer about just the process of how things are manufactured, all of a sudden you do start getting a different sense of, okay, on the outside it's easy to look at it from one way, but really, oh man, this thing is basically at an angle, and the news isn't doing anyone any harm. I mean, how many people have you heard talking about this thing and talking about it like they're a freaking engineer? I mean, dude, like, I'm a pilot and I'm like, dude, that is a cool system. I don't even know how the hell that works.
Right. Yeah.
But you know what was interesting? And I want anyone in the room to basically raise their hand if they basically have heard anyone talk about this. He goes, if you're really looking at what the main issue is here, is the role of automation in airplanes. And really the role of automation in anything with self-driving cars. He goes, that's what the real problem is what is the role of automation in aviation? It was about 4 or 5 years ago, there was an Air France flight. One of its sensors was knocked out in a storm over the Caribbean. Crashed at a nosedive from like 30,000 feet, killed everybody, right? Once again, a sensor went out, and the pilots were getting conflicting information. Autopilot was kicking off and on, and one of the big reasons why they crashed was that when the automation screwed up, there was a problem. About 3 years ago or 2 years ago, there was an AirAsia flight that was landing in San Francisco where the tail clipped the runway before it landed. And the reason why it did it was their automatic landing system went out. The pilot had to go to manual. Pilot crashed the airplane. Now we have 2 airplanes that went down because of faulty sensors. And it's like we're having a problem where these planes are so automated due to whether it be fuel efficiency, ease of use, that when these systems go wrong, pilots almost don't have the experience.
It's like a deer in headlight.
Exactly. They don't. It's like almost they don't know what to do, or at one point in time maybe they knew how to, but they don't. And so it's really bringing up this big issue of automate. Because once again, you obviously know what it's like to work in manufacturing, and people love to point the fingers. That is one of the big things that they started pointing out, was that we have, why weren't the pilots basically asking questions about what was in this system, almost like it's a new Mustang. Well, what's in this new Mustang, basically? I mean, I'm almost saying, like, why weren't you asking? But then it was interesting when they did kind of point, well, they actually didn't tell the pilots at all.
Nobody complains when everything goes great. I was like, oh, great, that's a new technology. That's excellent. It can take off by itself. It can land. It can autopilot. But as soon as something goes wrong, like, well, Johnson, why didn't you see this happening? Oh, I don't know. I told Sanderson to do it. Oh, Sanderson. Oh, I was on vacation that week. Everyone wants to pass them. I get it. They want to point the finger. That's what it seems like. When everything's going great, everyone's like, oh yeah, But when it goes wrong, boy.
Well, you can get so used to automation.
Yeah.
And if it works perfect, and then when you have one little glitch, everything is to it.
And the thing is, like, so you've worked in automotive industry, you know what it's like taking an idea from concept into making it in mass production. When they're thinking about a project, taken from like basically an AutoCAD design and actually now putting it into fruition, where does safety actually come in? And especially, where does safety come in when we're talking about profit? Like, is there like a rate? What is an internal discussion like in a transportation industry, even in healthcare?
Well, safety, safety, regardless if it's in the plant to the workers, or to the customer, everywhere, that is so paramount. It's almost the first thing that is done from selection of vendors, to select, approval of parts, approval of technology, is exactly what's its impact on safety. So, when people say they take shortcuts, no, I don't think that's the correct, but
sometimes safety comes with a price.
So now there was a formula that he threw out, and basically he said it's like a risk versus like reward formula when it comes down to safety. Where
I believe
what is
that.
the cost basically if something goes wrong in recall?
The auto industry
So
does that.
yeah, so
Well-
help me understand, because he threw it out there because he said that if you look at from the law perspective, that's how they kind of view these things sometimes, safety. So how does that? So what is that ratio? Because I know you understand this is your business background. What actually is that ratio, and how does it actually play out in an industry where, okay, if we're wrong, someone might die?
Well, it's basically, God, I don't know how to, but
In almost every situation, you have what is, I mean, we used to call it KT, is when we used to go in and look at every situational and every probability of something occurring. And then what we would do is that if that was that probability and it would occur, then what's its impact? Okay, and then you would take it from there and looking at, well, what's the impact if it would happen? You know, okay, it could cause a failure of this or a failure of that. You know, then to the most serious parts, if it would have a failure, then that usually would say, well, do we re-engineer? If we're feeling that the incident of an adverse situation that would have a very high probability of causing an extreme issue, i.e., say deaths or hurting patients or hurting people who do buy the cars or creating the situations in an airplane, then has to come the question is, do you re-engineer? You know, do you use that technology or whatever to it's really improved? You know, but those are things that are weighed out in every decision of, man, I'm trying to search for a real good way to tell you with an example, but
and I think
there's not one situation, even from
operations, sitting in there and listening to new types of operations they're going to use, is the surgeons and everybody else going down the line saying, well, if we do this, what's the probability of causing patient death? Well, that may be X. If you read I love listening to all these drug ads.
Oh, yeah.
They're telling you of every adverse effect.
Yeah, your eyes might fall out.
It's like
Flames might
everything.
shoot out of your ass. I mean, but think about like every other day. I mean, and I think this is like we're looking at why does the American public mistrust corporations? I mean, think about it. Every day you can go on TV and there's a lawyer company talking about it could be asbestos, it could be this medical device.
Mesothelioma.
If you or a loved one
I see that
suffers
one
from
all the time.
mesothelioma,
Yeah.
we have that. We have like the Depew like hip. We have like the surgical mesh. We have talcum baby powder. We have the $100 million lawsuit for Monsanto with Roundup. We have all these different companies. I mean, we had what was it, GM and Toyota with the cruise control, the throttles getting stuck, and we had the Ford and the Pinto and
We had GM a few years
you
You had Firestone.
We had Firestone.
With the Firestone radio.
I mean, literally, then we even going back now to the environment of, I mean, heck, we have internal documents with ExxonMobil going in the 70s going, hey, we think there is a link between fossil fuels and CO2 and climate change. And, but yet they're also the very ones paying all the money to basically say there is no climate change. So it's like we're bombarded all the time with companies, basically. We can't trust you because when push comes to shove, you are going to make a gamble, or at least the impression is you're going to gamble with if the profit and that perceived risk of what are the chances that might happen. It almost seems like that's the territory we're kind of in. And so when something like this happens, I think there are certain industries that we naturally maybe always thought were going to be off limits. Like they would never, ever mess up. And airplanes were one of them. And that's why I think the Boeing thing is a thing that is a shot across the bow, I think, for every American kind of going, wait a minute, what, even our airplanes that we fly on aren't even safe, that they're making gambles with it? And so, I mean, and that's how I almost think. And that's where I look at, as Americans, we look at, and I guess what worries me is that, we don't have any nuclear wars. We don't we can talk about like, threats of immigrants and whatever in healthcare, but it almost seems like it is like death by a thousand cuts right now. It's like, okay, we can't trust corporations because it seems like corporations are willing to sell Americans out, for.
Now, are the Americans to blame because they're still buying and using the
All
products?
right, so that brings up a great question.
Right. I mean, if enough people are dying in airplane crashes, for example,
yeah,
or a certain kind of plane, I'm going to stop buying a ticket on that plane.
Yeah,
that's just me though. There's some people that, you're not going to stop them. No, it won't happen to me. You have a better chance of getting struck by lightning than you do getting in a plane crash or whatever the odds are. I get that too, but plane crashes, or they get the national news.
I mean, it is a good point of like, have we gotten so comfortable that the very people that we've entrusted to basically look out for us are kind of taking advantage of the system, and we're either allowing ourselves to be played, or we're just too comfortable to really step and say anything.
Look at GM. Look at what GM a few years ago.
Yeah.
When that whole thing happened, what was going on with them? I think it's some kind of defect, and there was like 20 or 30 people died as a result of it. And not only that, they went back when they went through the records. They found emails from the executives covering it up, saying we know we have a problem. And you know what really shaked my belief in the system, right? I always thought, people that do bad things eventually will get their day in court and will pay for it. Like I always thought that, even the corporations, no matter who you are. And I think, I can't remember how many executives it was, but they found a number of them that buried these in emails. And then they tried to, when these emails try to get them, they like deleted the emails and tried to deny all knowledge. And they were, they found them all. And you know how many people were arrested and indicted for these
None.
20 or 30 deaths? Zero.
Yeah.
And for that, I know it's kind of off the subject, I blame President Obama, because he could have had the power. He could have done something. He didn't do anything. And I went, what? I went, you guys knew that they were killing, this was killing people, and they did nothing to recall. They did it later on. But at the time, I was like, and I was, I voted for Obama, and I was very just disappointed that off the hook. And all those guys that they resigned or got fired, and they probably got their golden parachutes and their buyouts and everything. But I was like, wow, nobody's being held accountable. Nobody got indicted.
See, they got
fined.
So, and this is, to me, is what I think is what's wrong with America. Now, I mean, Dad, so you've obviously lived through a lot. Do you think this is just business as usual, and Americans are maybe just now opening their eyes to it, or is it? Or do you look at it as, it was never this bad with how much companies have gambled with the very public that they're making money off of?
I've always I think there's always been unsafe conditions, but again, and I'll put it into two areas. There was a period of time when there was heavy regulation and fines, versus a time, say, after the Reagan era, in which we started seeing the pullback of regulations to favor business, because they're saying business was so regulated and it cost more money. I think when that came by, the profit motive overtook any sense of reality to society, because there wasn't really the regulations. But that doesn't mean that there weren't unsafe products.
Do you feel like products are getting more unsafe? Just in your experience over the years, do you think products are getting more unsafe, or there maybe or companies maybe are more willing to gamble that something doesn't happen?
I think they're more willing to gamble because there really isn't the rule of a regulation around sometimes, and they know the environment is favorable to business, to all that, compared to there. But if you go back to the '60s, the biggest area was Ralph Nader's quest on General Motors on the Corvair, where it would catch on fire and kill people.
Yeah.
And General Motors not accepting there. But I do think there's a little bit more where you see a lot more of the ability to where products are very quickly, defects in products are, and again, here we go back to mass media, is, what kind of product recalls were there back? I hate to say it, in the 60s and all that. Well, there wasn't that many that we knew of, because there wasn't really a means to communicate it or to expose us to where products fell, where they had there. Also, tort reform.
back then there weren't that many lawsuits. Now today, with all
well,
the
that's the
lawyers,
thing you hear a lot about with tort that because the lawyers have annihilated these companies. There's like inherent
Sure.
fear of doing a recall because you're going to get sued.
Sure.
That's what you said. That's when they judge it. Well, how much is going to recall going to cost versus a lawsuit?
Yeah.
And whichever one's cheaper, that's probably what they go with.
I mean, you take a look in the morning, which I watch some of the, or hell, the whole damn thing is on nothing but A and B firm hernia mesh recall. Were you implanted with this? Were
It's
you
totally
implanted with
true.
that?
I mean,
do you take this drug? And I mean, we didn't really have all that type of communication to there, but now, based on the fact that the lawyers are getting all this stuff, it's being made more public, because of the way the media is doing it. Well, now you got lawyers jumping on it, and litigation that they're doing class action suits. So
look at the NFL.
it's hard.
Yeah, the NFL CTEs,
yeah.
I think the same things were all there. It's just that we had no way of knowing, and business put products out there that maybe shouldn't have been put out there, but, so, okay, what's going to happen? I don't know.
But isn't this, but in this,
kill a person? Yeah.
Well, this is where I think we inherently, government, and now rightfully so, I think the role of government has been completely just bastardized because you really can't trust a lot of them because they all have these vested interests, right? And so it's like, let's get the government out of our lives. Let's deregulate. Let's let business do what business kind of does. But then it's like if you're, it's kind of like in football. If you pull the referees off the field, people are going to get killed, right?
Or at least reduce it down to like one or two referees.
That's the whole point. Then if you over-regulate it, you stifle a game, right? And so we seem to vacillate kind of back and forth, but the reality is that we're looking at the most basic job of government is to protect us militarily, right? But then to protect us from, businesses basically trying to maybe push the envelope too much. It's human nature. Human nature is one of those things that's a constant. You can go back to the Industrial Revolution and looking at how people ran businesses. I mean, Dad, maybe you can correct me. What was it? Was it the Spanish-American War where more Americans died from food poisoning than they did enemy bullets from like botulism?
Oh yeah, it was our first time.
I remember reading in the book Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, by Upton Sinclair.
Yeah.
It's the
Jungle,
beginning
yes.
of what business owners are willing to do to make a dollar. Look at slavery, cheap labor. Look at all of our. Everything it's human nature. Even in religion, money is the corrupter. It's the root of all evil.
The church will cover up, certain things, and
out of fear for money and lawsuits. And so, if every religion talks about it, if all throughout human history we know money corrupts, then why is it then that we think then businesses now all of a sudden can run themselves? And shouldn't then this be the calling for this is responsible government to at least protect us, to make sure companies at least have some rationale, some motivation to maybe not gamble so much with profit. But it's just, I don't know. And we look at companies and businesses, and these are the same companies and businesses that are pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into Congress, paying people off basically to basically put them first. Hell, Citizens United was a ruling that basically said government businesses can spend unlimited amount of money in politics because it stifles their First Amendment speech. And so is this a natural byproduct of, if they're going to do this in their own businesses, well then technically speaking they're taking control or manipulating or influencing the government to basically make it to where then they can keep doing the same thing and make it okay?
Well, I don't know if they're manipulating. They're definitely, doing what's on, doing the rules as far as how it goes on the books and everything. And I don't know, manipulating maybe. One of the thoughts is that if you have too much government intervention or too much regulation, then you stifle the new ideas, and then people are unwilling or unable to take these risks that sometimes these risks do get bigger rewards. So it's kind of a catch-22.
I think it's an addiction, though, because it's kind of like the same BS that I hear from parents that are saying, well, if I kick my kid off the couch because he's using heroin, he's just going to die out there. I'm like, well, that's the same damn thing they're telling us. Well, if you stifle it, we're not going to have new ideas, and other people are going to take over, and we're going to lose our place in the world. And it's like, I call bullshit.
Well, let me ask you, if you're a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon or some kind of medical doctor, and you're on the verge of some kind of breakthrough, whatever the ailment is, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to try this experimental surgery. Now, I realize they have people sign waivers and stuff, but let's just say that's not in effect here. So you want to try an experimental surgery. Never been done before, but you've done your research, you've done your homework, you think this could solve heart disease or something really great. And you get that person on the operating table, and it doesn't work. It goes horribly wrong. The person dies, and then they turn around and they sue you and for millions of dollars, and they win, and they put you out of business. Well, if I'm now the next heart surgeon or brain surgeon, I'm going to go, yeah, I don't know if I want to maybe take a risk. And I understand, risk is risk, but it is what it is. I don't know.
Yeah, but like in that example, then I get where you're going with it. In that example, though, it's at least the FDA has a approval process for a procedure or drug to where it won't even see a patient until they know it can be safe.
I know.
Right?
I'm just saying hypothetical. I'm just using hypothetical.
And that's the government stepping in, but you don't see that in anything else. So when we're talking about a new flying technology, like Dad, you were saying how like if like McDonnell Douglas or Northrop Grumman delivers a fighter pilot or a fighter jet. It's like, what, they test that thing out for, 8 years before it even gets certified to be used?
Well, if you just follow the news now, the F-35s and all that are going through now their orientations to be certified for combat.
Yeah.
And they're finding major mistakes.
Are those the
and
Raptors?
They're now going back to the manufacturer.
I don't know what. No, the Raptors are F-22. I'm not sure they call the F-35. Yeah.
Yeah, the F-35 is the new joint fighter.
But they find problems like sensors going wrong, right?
Sure.
And the thing is I understand with government contracts, if they don't deliver on time, they get dinged, right, with their contract. But the reality is, though, it is that their whole goal is to put out something that's actually going to work. So they'll test it before it even gets widely put out there. Whereas an airline jet, a car, how many times are these things really put through those paces before we find out something like this? And a sensor going wrong on an airplane, people die. And that's where it's just, once again, it's like I'm all about letting companies do what they're going to do, but as a clinician, I gotta call BS on this whole idea of hey, governments can regulate themselves. It's that we can't be, if it's government's job to regulate moral issues of like abortion and a crime and fill in the blank, it's like, isn't it then every bit more important than for government to protect us from the very thing that corrupts us more than anything, money?
What if the government itself is corrupted?
That's the problem.
Who polices the police?
And that, I mean, like that, and that's something like Dad, we've been talking about that over the years of, and when we're looking at what's the biggest threat to our national security, and it's not a coincidence that all these ex-generals that everyone respects and they're all saying the number one threat to national security is this hyper-partisan environment that we're in right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, if you want to sell a plane, remember what they used to say? Just take the generals to parties. That's how they sold planes.
Yeah,
nice.
Now there's laws against that, but I mean back, in the old days,
screwed up for all of us.
Coming up with planes was the who was it? Was I remember? DiCaprio was playing the aviator.
Howard Hughes.
And Howard Hughes, and they were doing the party. He goes, well, hell, that's the way it's done.
Literally.
Take the general, spend all the money, and hopefully get a plane.
Yeah. but it is
so.
And that's very and that's and the thing is like, but those planes that were going to be safe though. I mean, eventually. I mean, pilots. I mean, they're going to test flight. They know what they're kind of getting into.
So they're called test pilots.
That's what they're called, test pilots.
Basically, the evolution of an airplane is the pilots start giving feedback. They build the basic. Now you start getting the feedback from the pilots, and you start making corrections. The same thing is with a car. You put the car out as a model and the new things, and you start watching the dealer repairs, what's coming back on warranty.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, if you start seeing a seat slider breaking, that they've had multiple incidents of seat sliders. Well, now that goes back to quality control. They do an action report and they start looking at and testing the levers.
Well, it's like the
And the
Fusions.
next thing you know, they find out the sliders are defective.
Well, think about it.
So
So
they
I have
improve
like
the
one of
product and
my
they
little
retro.
daily drivers, a Ford Fusion, right? And so literally, like it was like last year. So people are dying and getting maimed from the canisters that they made, that the exploding little, airbag thing, on the passenger side, it was detonating, and then a canister that was holding it, the shrapnel would fly into the people.
That's awesome.
And so the thing is, like, how many people got hurt before they finally went, "Hey,
Well,
by the
people got
way,
killed.
you need to get that taken care of."
Now, was that on impact, or was that just if you driving down the street?
Well,
Basically, when it
when
exploded,
it exploded, it was like a
Oh.
shrapnel. It was almost like a
shrapnel.
yeah, it was like a
Yeah, sent
grenade.
shrapnel.
Yeah,
And that was
and so, I
one
mean, and
company.
and we see it with medical devices. Like, how many have to go before finally, somebody goes, "Hey, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore." It's human nature, and that's where I think, we can get so distracted. I think with, the who, the what, the where, and it's like, no, we're talking about human nature here. Human nature is not going to change, and we have to take a step back and going, what country do we have when the people that have the most power to influence everything? I mean, influence every law. The regulation processes, I mean, things that affect everyday Americans, and how comfortable does it make anyone feel? If profit is going to change how much I'm willing to risk with your life,
Safety.
yeah,
It's dollars over
I mean,
safety.
and it's like that should scare the crap out of everyone. And then those are the very people influencing our government. Those are the very people changing the laws to make it easier for them to do what they want to do and make a profit.
Does that mirror human nature in general, though?
I think it does,
I mean,
yeah.
we're not robots. I mean, we all
And
have
so,
feelings and emotions and wants, and money's one of those.
Yeah.
What the old saying is, what does a person with a lot of money want? More money.
Yeah.
It's never enough.
and that's what I think. It's just I don't know. I do think that we have to take a step back as a country and go, okay, like, once again, how do you make America great again when the people that are trying to make it great only want it great for themselves? And even more egregious, using the media to try to convince you that it's really good for you when it really isn't.
I blame the media on that one, though. They know what's going on, and they choose to whether it's a liberal or a conservative news website. They know what they're doing, and they choose to push that anyway. Instead of just reporting it, they say, here's why you should agree with this, or here's why you should be outraged. It's never just, here it is, you decide. It used to be that way. Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings days. Before that, Walter Cronkite. I miss those days.
But where's dude? I mean, and Dad, like, because I always hear this from clients a lot. Is as people get older, it's kind of like you take a step back, right, and you kind of look at like what's important, and you look at future generations. It's called death and stagnation versus generativity. Where it's kind of like you're thinking about the future and your own mortality. And Dad, you're a veteran. You've been in business your whole life, and so obviously sometimes you can get jaded or even desensitized to it. But now, at your age, you're approaching that retirement age, you're looking at the world the way that it is, you fought for this country. When you're kind of looking at, what's the I guess responsibility of your generation now, seeing maybe the way things are and maybe be able to have that bigger picture of how it's been? Do you think there is a responsibility of your generation maybe to kind of step up? I think we're seeing that with Joe Biden a little bit. Maybe that's why he's stepping up and running, kind of like, okay, let's get some big kids back in a room. I mean, do you think there is a sense of responsibility for the baby boomers to
I think a lot of the 60s was the age of the protest, was the age of social concernment, and social involvement by people. And then we grew up a little bit to where we had to make our ways. And now we're coming back, and I think what's starting to happen is we never lost that desire or that passion to be crusaders, to change, make love, not war, stamp out war, stamp out disease, stamp out poverty. And I think that's we're starting to see coming from our older generation is they're now going back, that they have now more time. Kids are raised, the families are now mature, they have time on their hands, and now they're going back and wanting to go back to be those crusaders to, correct. In fact, I was listening to Biden today, on the news things, and I'm sitting there going, God, it sounds like we're back to being flower children and taking the acid again. I'm like, okay, guys, are we going to paint sunflowers on ourselves and having all that? But no. But to answer your question, I think you're now seeing the reverse of the baby boomers as they go into the twilight. That crusade was still within them.
Well, I think
it
because
never
you
went
guys,
away. It was just, we had to make our way. We became businessmen. We played. We liked money. We liked earning and everything else. So maybe we lost our way a little bit. But now we're coming back. In the twilight, they're coming back.
Well, I think even I was talking with someone else about this, and one of the things they said was that even if we did realize it, that maybe we were almost like selling or almost kind of mortgaging the future for making money now, and just knowing we're kicking the can down the road on some of these things. There was very much this fear of, well, it's like now that you're part of the system and you see the system for what it is, even if you try to mess it up and change it, it's going to really screw things up for you, the security of your family, and if you're really talking about who's the first generation meals, almost kind of like the baby boomer generation was like, well, fuck it, if you look at how bad the 60s were, it's like, well, fuck it, no one else is going to take care of me, I'm going to do me. But now that you guys are in that retirement age, to where all of a sudden it's like, well, we don't have the fear, or as much as the fear, to maybe stir things up a little bit, because we're not as much basically vested into it.
Right, you kind of done what you wanted to do, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, well,
and now it's that maybe like, okay, now because we have that ability now to look back going, okay, maybe we need to kind of step up and maybe change things. But
look at the baby boomers, though. Look how much we've advanced, as a society,
that's a catch-22 too. Yeah,
devolved. Depending on how you look at it, evolved or gotten worse. A little bit of both. But overall, I think, look where we were at 40 years ago.
Because I just look at as Gen Xers, we're it's our job to take over this country. Literally, and a lot of us are really unhappy with it. And I think the unhappiness that I think a lot of the baby boomers got maybe in their 50s and 60s, we're getting it in our 30s and 40s. And now I think we have the ability to sit there and go, nah, this shit ain't cool. We have a realistic viewpoint of, okay, like, we can't do these extreme left, we can't do these extreme right things, but it's like, hey, you know what? You need to look out for us. I also understand that you guys need to get the freedom to do what it is that you need to do. But we also have the ability, literally, we can, in one election, we can vote out a lot of people. We do have a lot of power now with said fake media or mass media that is basically screwing things up. So I look at this is a time, I do feel like we're at a crossroads right now. It may not be a nuclear war, but it very much is an identity for the soul of this country, and what type of country do we want it to be? To me, I look at it, there's a reason why suicide rates, depression rates, drug rates are going up, is that people realize at younger and younger age things are not good, and they don't want to go into the world, and because they see it for what it is, but then they also realize they have no choice. They have to almost participate.
I hate to say it, but I don't think that obviously it's not the only solution, but I don't know that a change of president would make that big of a difference, if at all. I think it's technology in general. I think the society's a different place. I think it's different. I don't know what else to put it. I can't put my finger on one thing, but it's not the same as it was 25 years ago, which wasn't the same as it was 25 years before that. It's just.
So, and so, Dad, I'm gonna kind of close things out and give you the last, kind of big, suggestion here. But as a baby boomer, what do you think? Because I think Bill's right. It's not going to be a new president, and so if you're looking at, okay, what really needs to be done? The government is corrupt. Corporations have run amok and maybe have gone way too far in one direction, and as a result, they're putting profits above what's best for the country and people. So what is it that we can do? What are one or two things that we can all do to maybe set it going in a different direction? Is there anything we can do?
You know, it's a good darn question. I go, when you have a lot of your representatives, I mean, look how many millionaires, businessmen are in Congress. I mean,
Over 50%.
Look how the three branches of government now are so polarized and becoming now, how you want to put it, becoming more polarized by the ruling party and everything else. When I saw some comments by Mitch McConnell, I'm sitting there going, well, we're not going to get anything done. It's all going to stop, because if it's against the political dominance, if the Republicans own the Senate and the Dems, well, anything passed by the House is Democratic, goes to the House, it's going to get blocked.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good it is or for how.
And everyone is basically looking for payback from what the previous administration did. Going, you do that to me, sure shit ain't going to pass that now. Because once again, they're doing what's best for them and their party, and they're posturing not what's best for people. And so the government is not necessarily about profit; it's about what is power. I
have a big concern how anyone. I don't care who the heck the next president is. I really do think it's. I don't see how it's all going to work. To be very honest, you know, unless there's a fundamental revolution or something that changes everything and starts bringing it back. But I think, as one person said, and I can't remember where I heard it, is essentially the election of Trump. And it was inevitable because the country was moving towards it anyway, and then Trump just came along and did it. But
Trump was a grenade to the system. That's what Trump was. Trump was, fuck it. Yeah. Let's just throw a grenade and let's blow it all up and we'll see what happens.
Well, but I think what the key was, the country was moving that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people were fed up with government. It was moving. And the political parties weren't doing it. Now the people were getting mad. And I'll tell you the truth, as the guy said, how's it going to change? And one person really said on the panel, I don't think it is. I think we're going to have to start adjusting to an all new form of government.
Well, and I think you are 1,000% accurate, and I actually have a solution.
You do?
I do.
Term limits.
Even like term limits. I mean, the whole idea is that literally. So think about all the companies. All right, think about all the entities that are out there that we think are contributing to the issue. Right? If everyone was pissed off and went, you know what, tomorrow we're not going to buy your product. We're not going to go to your store. We're not going to listen to your show. We're not going to. Literally, we're going to go to your.
That was of the '60s.
So literally, but literally with social media now, okay. You've seen it with like Laura Ingrams and some of these people where they've made these comments and they've lost all these people then right into their the sponsors, and they lose their sponsor. If we took a look at like all the major companies that are kind of creating this log jam and with buying basically our representatives to do what's best for them, literally then they would go out of business, or they would be forced to have to change what it is they're doing. I think if we were to do that, it's not about changing the government. You can't change the government. Can I change the environment that the government is within that is creating the corruption that we have? That's how you do it. Remember, Dad, in an IndyCar where Toyota, they couldn't change the boost, right? They couldn't change. We can't mess around with how much boost this engine puts out. But then they changed the environment that the pop-off valve was on, so it actually it wasn't breaking the rules. All it was that, well, you didn't say we couldn't change the environment that the pop-off valve was on, so it didn't pop. Basically, it created more boost, and so they manipulated the environment of the very thing you were policing, and that's how they changed it. That's how I look at. That's how we fix this thing.
Do you think with people with so many?
But you got to have the political leaders to do it.
Yeah.
I think you need people, because people. You got to look at people are doing the sponsor thing without a leader.
People want to protest, or they want to boycott certain things. Don't you think, though, especially in today's environment, with so many people being so outraged over so politically correct, and someone says something, and maybe they mean it in a bad way, maybe they don't, and people just jump all over them and say, I am now boycotting all of your sponsors of your show, and if you don't pull this person off the air, or if you don't do this, we will protest against you. We'll never buy this. And it's like, but then when you do have something major, something really important, I mean, for crying out loud, you have Alyssa Milano asking women to go on a sex strike. Sex strike. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the most basic of human biology, I think. I just...
That's the thing. I'm not going to take a shit now. I'm going to hold it. Fuck Charmin.
That's what I mean. Like,
fuck them. I am not going to use their
So when
product.
you do have something that's legitimate and everyone's like, hey, this really sucks, let's put pressure on the sponsor. You're going to go, wait a minute, I've heard this 10 times this week.
That's the shit that's mind-numbing to me, is that the shit that you'll get people to organize on the boycott is always like, they stopped making, like, Cheeto dust. And because, no, fuck that. And
We're
it's like,
mad as hell. We're not going to take it anymore.
And that's where it's about the organization. And I think, not necessarily a political leader per se, but it is about, there does need to be some sense of organization.
Like bring back original Chex Mix. Remember that? Remember they took it off the market? How mad you and I were back in like 93?
Coke too, And it's just,
Terrible.
and I think, we obviously need to change something. You just do get the sense of like, something has to give, but I also look at it's within our power. The very thing that's made things go in the direction that they've gone in is the very thing that we can manipulate and take advantage of the change. So I'm going to look to the baby boomers, Dad. It's all on you guys. So you let us know when you're going to fix it, and then we'll just go along with it and just show up after you guys have already done it. Is that cool? Is that a deal? That'd be the best thing ever. That'd be like the most like Gen X thing to do. All right, you guys handle all of it, and then we'll show up after you guys have done it.
Thank you. We'll take it from here.
We'll take it from here. Then we got it.
We'll screw it up from here. You guys fix it. We'll just.
We'll wrap things up here. Dad, as always, we appreciate you coming on the air. One, you're just smarter than us, and two, but I think we need that perspective, because if, once again, we just looked at it from just the times that we lived, and I think we're all going to look at that way. So your feedback's always appreciated, Dad. So thank you so much for coming on again, as always.
My pleasure, guys. All right.
Yeah. So we'll
right.
we'll close this thing off here.
Will you fly on the new or the Boeing when it comes back?
If it gets approved, I think...
Just don't be the first one.
Just don't be the first. Yeah, I'm going to be the first one. You can.
Well, second question is, if I were to get caught masturbating on this Boeing jet, would I be charged with hijacking? Yeah.
I think that might be a different show. Okay. For a different time.
Well, just let it marinate.
I'm going to let it marinate in there. And it's done marinating. Mm-hmm. It's one of those marinades that you realize that was a bad marinade. You just toss it, but you tell everyone it tasted good. Like, oh, yeah, we'll come back to that one. We'll come back to that.
All right.
I guess we're always trying to save the world, aren't we, on this show?
I think we need to colonize the moon. That's the only way we're going to start over.
The only other angle that I was taking of what's going to save shit is aliens. Aliens just come down going, all right, like, you know what, y'all have. We tried trusting
movie
you
has
guys.
Aliens made stuff better. They've made it worse.
Well, that's a human's inherent fear. But I'm looking at if they came down when
Kodos.
Hey, if they came down when, hey, y'all kind of really messed things up, and they're going to say y'all, and they're from Texas,
and they're going to speak English.
And they're going to speak English, and they're going to be, listen, y'all really messed it up, and we tried letting you guys handle it for a while, but yeah, we're just going to take this thing over for now. So yeah,
I like aliens to come down and try to speak to us, and like we can't understand each other. And
what if they spoke like they're
fuck this, and they get on their plane and they fly back. I can't understand a word they're saying.
I just wanted to order pizza. Damn it. Those Donatos. God.
All right.
Oh, all right. Let's get out of here. You know what?
Guys.
All right. Well,
hey,
Dad.
We'll have a good one.
We absolutely are, everybody.
All right.
So,
B-Ray, you have a good one.
Hey, great talking to you like always, my man.
I know.
All right.
So we will save the world. We will. Dad, thank you. Bill.
Okay.
Yes.
Armchair quarterback.
Yes.
Myself, Michael Devine, the armchair quarterback. No, I'm America's counselor. You're the armchair quarterback. This is how messed up everything is. Everything is so messed up, I don't even know who I am. That's how it's so messed up. It's okay, though. It's all right. We'll figure it all out. So myself, Michael Devine, Bill Reed, Dad, Richard Devine, Porter's Network. This is Gray Matters Radio. And remember, everybody, next time someone asks you, hey, man, you Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, red, blue, whatever, remember, say fuck that noise. My ass is gray. All right, everyone. You be good to each other. Save the world one podcast at a time. All right, everybody. Next time. Peace.
Peace.